Call to order the July 8th Transportation Committee meeting to order. Roll members, Madam Chairman, Mr. Dempsey Lambert is absent, and Mr. Randy Kluwart is not here yet. We have Mr. Pat Bell, Chairman, sitting in on this meeting with us. Mr. Pat's going to lead us in invocation followed by the pledge.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for all the blessings you have bestowed upon us. Help us in our efforts this evening to act in a way that you would find right and pleasing to you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll move on to number 3 as a public comment period. Anyone wanting to speak on any agenda item, please sign in. But we have a few people that's going to speak right up front. We're going to ask Miss Marion Lejeune to come up front. Miss Marion.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Marion Lejeune. I live in Forest Heights by St. Mark's Catholic Church. The Bible says, ask and you will receive. I'm asking and I'm begging that the board get the work rolling to put covered culverts on Roddy Road, especially from Weber City to the Air Line before you cross Parish. Also, we need white side lines on Roddy Road. The right side, Weber City Road to Air Line, has a very deep ditch on the right side. No, it's not covered. No shoulders, no white line. On the left side, it's not as deep, but still has no shoulders, no white line. Putting covered culverts on that part of Roddy Road, Weber City to the Air Line, would be 1,414 feet. But more than half of that section is covered already. I want to thank you for fixing this problem. We all use Roddy Road. Going to Walmart, St. Mark's Catholic Church, and more important, East Ascension High School, and going to Highway 30. And we all pray no one else will be hurt because of no shoulders, deep ditches, and no white side line. I see Benny Johnson here. I'm praying he will help me with this matter. And I want to thank y'all. Do you have any questions or comments?
Mr. Bob, give us a little background on Roddy Road. You know, it was been on the project as a widening project for the last several years, and maybe why we don't have any white lines on this section of the road, or can that possibly happen?
Yes. At the outset, I'd like to express my sympathy to the Lejeune family on their loss. I'm very sorry for that. This section of Roddy Road is 1,414. To widen it out and put decent shoulders on, very similar to what we've got under construction on Roddy Road, Joseph Ario, which this is a part of that continuous route across the parish, is estimated to cost in excess of $1.4 million. There's only 35 feet of right-of-way on this particular section. In order to make improvements, to add culverts and to widen it out, would be more than that. The entire section of parish-owned portion of Roddy Road has been estimated by GSA, who is the design consultant on the project, is in excess of $13 million. This is just one section of 3. Mrs. Lejeune is absolutely correct on the need for shoulders on parish roads. There's not a lot of parish roads that have decent shoulders. Joseph Ario and Boudreaux, when they're completed, will have 4-foot shoulders. Which is, in my mind, the minimum, absolute minimum that should be on a fairly high volume road. The amount of traffic on this particular section is significant. I would imagine, I don't have an exact count, but I would imagine it's in the range of in excess of 6,000 vehicles a day.
At least, yeah.
We're currently working on the section around the school with the bridges. We have recognized the need for the entire section. At this time, we don't have the funds to program all of it at once.
Thank you, Mr. Bob.
Well, I do hope, Mr. Bob, that your $1 million a child is worth more than $1 million.
I could never put a price on a life.
Right. But that's all I'm asking is that part right now so the other children can realize what went wrong. And when they see this line and they see the culverts, they'll realize, well, hey, I better do something better, something good. There won't be a loss of a life. And like I said, that section is more than half covered already.
Mr. Johnson, you had some.
Ms. Lejeune, as before, I mean, we can't express enough the sympathy we have for you and your family, and I've been knowing you most of my life, and we're praying for you and your family all the time. Mr. Bob, I know we don't have the funds to do the widening, but like Ms. Lejeune talked about, even if we were to, could we at least do the research to find out the expense of putting the culverts in and smoothing that out to where we won't have a repeat of the incident that happened with their granddaughter between that section? Most of it's already covered. I'm not sure what it would take, or if we could squeeze that into the budget or at least work it, but I think that would be until the money and the funds could be there to do what's really needed with the widening of the highway and putting shoulders on the road. That would at least hopefully minimize the problems that we're having there, in addition to the striping and everything else. I don't think it's necessarily an unreasonable request. I think if nothing else, we can look into it and see what kind of expense we're looking at.
I'd be glad to look into it. I have to tell you that adding culverts is not as simple as it sounds. I mean, it sounds good that we have a ditch that we could just put a culvert in and solve the problem, and I can assure you that the drainage problems that would result would be significant. There's just very little right-of-way in there, 35 feet of right-of-way, so you don't have any ability to widen the road and add shoulders. You've got a sewer treatment facility right there on the edge. You've got mobile homes that ultimately will have to be moved back. I'd look at it, but I can't give you any kind of hope that I can make a significant difference in that figure.
And Mr. Bob, the striping on the roads, are they legit for the road wide enough to put the striping to?
The road is wide enough for striping. We have a striping contract that'll be opened when? Okay, we're receiving quotes now from the purchasing department, and we'll absolutely look at that section. If it's not on the list, we'll do our best to see if we can put edge stripes on that road.
When will you look into this?
The quotes are coming in now. We'll look at it within a week.
Okay. Can I call you in a week?
Yes, ma'am.
And you'll find out the problems we'll have for the drainage, putting culverts?
That's going to take significant amount of time. You're asking for a detailed engineering study on that.
You're talking weeks?
Yes, ma'am. Weeks.
Okay. I'll call you in a couple of weeks about that problem.
Okay.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lejeune. We also have Miss Tina Labut. I'm going to badge it up. Labitu? Okay.
Hi, I'm Tina Labitu. I don't know how much more I can say that she didn't say, but just a little bit about the striping. I live down just this little one-road street, the Parish, off of Loosemore down Dotterson Drive. The Parish repaved not too long ago, and I have beautiful striping with white lines and yellow lines down a little subdivision street, so which we didn't need. So I think, you know, moving some of these funds, some of these little one-lane subdivisions that maybe get it because of the sheriff lived nearby or a councilman's down our street, you know, save that funds for a parish road that really needs it. some Some of the main roadways are beautiful, and y'all have done a nice job of keeping up the main roadways. They're nice and smooth with nice shoulders. And as you know, some of the parish roads that bisect the town don't have adequate shoulders. The population has grown tremendously over the last few years, and I'm one of them who will get away from Highway 44 and Airline, cut through Roddy Road or Cannon Road to get to where I'm going. And it's not just Roddy Road. All these other roads have no shoulder, no striping, huge ditches, and one 6-inch little off the road overcorrect can cause an accident on any of us, not just a teenager. More population also means more tax money coming in, so it's kind of a balance there. I really think if reappropriate some of these funds, there could be something done, whether it's striping, a hazard sign, something, until the funds could be made to actually improve some of these roads or shoulders. So we're just asking that y'all ride through some of these substandard roads, and no, we're not asking for a quick fix because we know realistically that can happen, but there could be some temporary measures to at least warn people what they're driving on. They might not be from around here and realize some of the conditions of these roads. So, I mean, I'm from here, I want to stay here, I want my children to grow up here, and I want them to be able to drive safely through town. I'm scared to death of them to get a license because it's really not safe sometimes to even just go across town. This traffic is tremendous, and the roads are really substandard in a lot of places. So we're just asking you to really look through some of these roads and try to make them safer for all of us.
Thank you. Got now Mr. Doug Ford.
Good afternoon. I'm the uncle of the niece that died, and I'm going to speak for her right now. And I'm going to tell you what she said, okay? She said, I barely ran off the road, and I'm not here anymore. Okay? Everybody has their first accident. Most everybody lives through it. She had her first accident. She barely ran off the road. There was no shoulder there for her to get back on the road with. Everybody runs off the road. So I can imagine, I'm here for you, I'm here for you, I'm here for you, and you. So you don't have to go through what we went through last week. Because when I got the phone call, I thought it was my kid. I'd already heard about the wreck. That piece of road has been a piece of, you know what, through 3 administrations, and it needs to be fixed. If you're going to throw culverts down, throw them down. You're going to save a life. You're going to sleep better at night. The deck was stacked totally against our kids. If you don't have kids that drive yet, God help you when they start driving, because they're going to get on these roads and you're going to get that phone call. And you're going to go identify the body of a daughter, a girl that you just hugged, okay? It ain't fun. It ain't fun going to tell your brother she's dead, okay? I hunt, I go out in Greensburg, and I'm on a Louisiana road full of potholes. I don't know where I am, but I know as soon as I get in Mississippi, because they got good roads. They got shoulders on the sides, they got lines. You know why? Mississippi cares about the people that pay the taxes. They want them to be on safe roads. Even if they're in a house for 20 miles, they want that road safe. We deserve the same thing. Each and every one of us should not. There's roads I forbid my kids to drive down because I'm scared. I got to stop when another car comes by. Cannon Road's eating away all the way to the center line. We pay people in this parish to drive around in trucks. We pay their gas. We put them in a brand new air-conditioned vehicle to go look for this stuff. Where are they? Why ain't it getting done? Why am I doing it, coming to tell you when they ought to be telling everybody the problem? I talked to the parish president right before this meeting. He says, you got 3 or 4 people to ride around and look for this stuff. I think you ought to fire them. You know, you talk about studies, go ahead and study it. By the time you finish your study, you're going to have another dead person. Every person here, I guarantee you, in this courtroom knows somebody that died on Roddy Road. It's been a problem a long time. Just remember, the next phone call you get, it might be one of your grandchildren or your kids, and you have the power to change this, and y'all ought to do it.
Thank you, Doug. Bob, as quick as we can, please try to get, some of these questions answered, as far as how quick we can get this done, and some quotes on it. Any more questions from the commission? We're gonna move on to B, which is Mr. Billy Arsamont. I don't see him in the audience. Oh, there he is. He's hiding from me. Mr. Billy.
Thank you. I guess this is probably an inappropriate commentary following the last discussion, but one of the things that I've been on Swamp Road since 1999, and I think I'm right when I say this, that as far as an entire road from one end to the other, it's the only road that has a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. Now, it's a windy road, and it doesn't have the shoulders, and it has the things that go on. But there are few people, if any, that ride 25 miles an hour on that road. So I don't know why it got dropped. I think because there were some young kids on the front end, and somebody was influential with the councilman, and it got dropped at the beginning of the road to protect the kids, which is fine. That's no longer the case. And what we're experiencing now is a fairly frequent amount of speeding checkpoints by the sheriff, which is fine. I'll be real candid with you. I was a victim of that situation on Sunday morning. I talked to Pat when he came in campaign. I talked to his predecessor on a number of occasions to see if we could just get a little bit of an uplift with the speed limit to make it palatable to other parish roads, not to make it excessive. I think it was 35 when we first purchased the property there. It got dropped down. So I guess my request is, I don't know the process. You guys have to think about what to do. You may have to do evaluations on whether it makes sense to drive 35 or 40 miles an hour on that road. I can tell you 99% of the people that drive it drive about 40. That's what I got ticketed for the other day. I don't know of any accident except somebody being foolish in the curve and not paying attention to the 15 mile an hour in the curve, which you must do because the curves are pretty dangerous on that road. But if you follow that law and you get on the straightaways, 35 to 40 is a very, very palatable driving procedure. So that's kind of what I'd like somebody to look into and give us an idea whether that makes sense to do that, and to maybe relieve us of the, I guess, the constant ticket situations and just the constant concern of driving so slow on that road, which nobody does. Now, I think driving 60 or 65 on that road, somebody should get a ticket. I have no qualms about that, and I see that quite often as well. But I've seen officials drive, 40 miles an hour. I followed them the entire road. So we either have the law or we don't have the law, and it applies for everybody. It's a ticklish situation. Nobody likes to up the speed limit, and I'm a bit hesitant to come here, but I just think after 9 years of seeing the situation what it is, and knowing that it was more, and looking at all the roads all over the parish, there are subdivisions with 30 mile an hour speed limits. If you go to Azalea Lakes, which is a crowded subdivision, it's 30 miles an hour driving through that whole place. And it's windy, and roads are just right up against the property line. So whatever is a reasonable upgrade would be what we'd like you to look into. Whatever your decision is, we'll live with it, obviously. I'm not here to plead a case that doesn't make sense, but I think 25 is a bit slower than the road would allow, and whatever would be a safe process for people to drive and to be consistent with what people are actually doing on that road, it would be a request of ours for you to look at that. Whoever does that, I'm not sure who's that in your department. Would you look at that? Okay, and we'll live with the end result. So I'm not here insisting that you raise the speed limit. Just give us a break if you can and make it more palatable for people who drive in that road every day, every day, every day. I'll be happy to address any questions anybody has.
Any commission have any questions?
Yeah.
Mr.
I guess
Bob,
nobody else wanted to come up here and speak, so I kind of got the dog chore to do this for a lot of people on the road who feel as I do as well.
And I guess, I don't know if you're familiar with Swamp Road, Mr. Bob. You drove it. And
Yes, I am.
as it is a through road, but it is curvy. So I guess
Swamp
your
Road
opinion-
has 5 very sharp curves, 15 miles an hour, like
Yes.
Mr. Arsenal mentioned. You better go 15
Yes.
miles an hour.
Yes.
And it has a railroad track that you've got to cross, and it acts as a pretty severe speed bump. On either end of Swamp Road has the straight stretches, and I would imagine those are the locations that speeding occurs. I also imagine that's a location where the sheriff's officers sit and give the tickets.
There are about 3 straightaways.
Yeah. 2
one
on
about-
each end for sure.
And then one in the middle, that
Yeah.
is straightaway between Seven Oaks and the next curve, which is
Yeah.
maybe a quarter of a mile, something like that.
I guess my first reaction is that we could certainly look at that. I'm not particularly in favor of the middle sections of changing that. I drive through Swamp Road on occasion. I don't live there, but I do drive through there on occasions as I drive a number of roads. Frankly, I don't drive more than 15 to 20 through the whole stretch because it's narrow. The houses are relatively close. We made improvements a couple of years ago just to improve those curves
Yes,
a
you
little
did.
bit.
And the improvements actually are quite good.
Yeah, and but I certainly wouldn't mind looking at the ends, if you will. But in general, the entire route, I could tell you I could not be supportive of raising it in the middle.
All right.
That's fine. We'll just
Thank you, Mr. Bill.
let us know what happens.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Liz, let it be known that Mr. Rainer Kluwatis joined us. Number 4 is chair's addition. Anyone have any emergency items that need to be brought up? Move on to number 5, presentations. Ms. Liz, any presentations? No. Move on to number 6, discussion of solicitation of fundraising on public highways. I brought this up because I've been getting a lot of phone calls, and unfortunately it is on Roddy Road where we're seeing a lot of this take place. You know, our road is narrow, and we got 2 roads that, 2 cars pass side by side, and we have people in the middle of our road soliciting for funds for sports or other items. We do have an ordinance in place where it states that the person standing on the highway has to be 16 years or older, but I see that's not taking place, and a lot of times it is younger kids. The police department has to enforce this, and it's tough for them to do so. They have so many other issues in the parish, So I'm just wanting to bring this to the Transportation Committee and to administration to look at. We have, like I said, we have an ordinance here, but the liability on the parish is pretty strong, I believe. I don't think this ordinance would stand up in court if we had someone get run over on our highways, because it is a parish highway, and we're allowing them to stand in the middle of the highways to do so. So I want administration and legal to look at this and come back with us. I really would like to see us go away with it altogether. Most parishes don't allow it, and I think there's other way of having fundraisers for athletes and sports to go to events. Mr. Bell?
Thank you, sir. I too, sir, have been getting many calls. I say many, 3 or 4 this past week. I guess it all happened this past weekend where they had people out on various corners, but I've been getting calls also.
So, Mr. Bob?
I will be glad to have Lindsay to look at it and to make a report as to the parish liability for this situation. One of the issues that comes to my mind is that if in fact we issue a permit to somebody and they get injured while in the middle of the road, does that increase our liability, or the fact that we've got a statement in here that we're protected against any harm? I think that's a question for Lindsay, and I'll be glad to ask her and report back.
And the ordinance we have in place was put in 1997. We have grown tremendous, and one part is the building department has to enforce it, and their requirements has to be that the proposed site and time does not create undue congestion or safety hazard to traveling publics. Everywhere in our parish right now is very heavily traveled, and so I think that part right there is stating that, we need to do something about it. So, Mr. Bob, if you could definitely bring something back to us so we can address this issue.
I will.
Thank you. We're going to move on to number 7, the Road Department Monthly Report for June 2008. Mr. Bob, Director Bob Turner.
In June we did a number. You've got a handout that shows a number of different roads that we've done various things on: cleaning, installing culverts, cleaning ditches, making road repairs. There are 81 different locations that we have worked on in June. In addition to that, we have dug over 20,000 linear feet of ditches. We have cleaned over 4,000 feet of culverts. In weed control, we started cutting grass in March. In June, on various state highways, we've done cutting on 935, 431, 931, 42, 61, 44. We sprayed 44, 621, 74, and in addition to that, we have our own parish routes in sections, and we've done 4 of those sections. 86 miles of parish ditches were cut in June. 55 miles of state roads were cut. 125 miles of parish roads were sprayed, and 79 miles of state roads were sprayed. That's the status on our maintenance operations for June. Be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Mr. Bob? Mr. Kluwat.
Mr. Bob, while we're talking heavily on parish roads tonight, can you give...
I'm sorry.
While we're speaking heavily on parish roads, the condition of parish roads tonight, can you run that number by us we'd had a while back? What's the total number of parish roads we have in the parish, miles?
We have over 565 miles of parish roads. There are 260 miles of state roads in the parish.
So in other words, our predominant roads are in mileages of parish roads.
It is. However, I want to caution you is that the vast majority of our traffic is on the state roads, which we mow, and when you're mowing and cars are going by at 55 miles an hour just 2 feet off the edge of your tractor is pretty unnerving, and not a lot of people can do that.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we've been able to do it relatively safe, but it is a hazard.
Yes, I just got a quick question on our agreement with the state to maintain the mowing on these roads with the escalating price of fuel that goes along with everything else. How are we doing on that?
We just recently renewed the contract with the state to mow most of the state roads in the parish. The value of the contract is just a little less than $160,000. It's the same amount as it was last year. It has no provisions for a fuel increase, and quite clearly, we probably expend $100,000 more than we receive under the terms of the contract. We have looked at that, and we've asked for the state to evaluate our cost and to reimburse us for our actual cost. They've chosen not to do that, and it really comes down to the fact that either we mow it for the benefit of our citizens, or we don't mow it, and the state will mow it much more infrequent. And I'm not sure that our citizens would really desire that.
That's the
A couple of years ago, we did not execute the contract until fairly late, and the outcry from the citizens was enormous. We really, in fact, we got to the point where we were doing some mowing without a contract. The demand was so great by our citizens.
And that's the point I wanted to bring up, is basically that It's not a money-making proposition, but it's a service to the citizens of Ascension Parish that DOTD has not been able to provide over the years.
That's exactly correct.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Lohr?
Just wanted to go back a little bit and just want to make sure that the public's aware that we understand roads is the number1 priority, not from a convenience issue, but a safety issue in this parish. I mean, I think I speak for everybody on this council and the administration that we know that, that has to be where the majority of our funds go to, and it has to be the highest in our priority. But something I found out the other day that just blew my mind and illustrated how big a problem we're facing here is, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the analysis you did, we asked you just to repave roads, how long it would take every road, parish road, just parish roads in this parish would take 57 years at the rate we're funding. That's completely unacceptable. We all know that. And that's not even counting, the fact that we haven't built a new road in this parish in 30 years. We have one little 4-lane section that's mostly on Highway 44, one 4-lane road in the parish, and it's mostly in the city of Gonzales. So none of these things are acceptable. Where we're at this point, though, is trying to get in there and figure out, has it just not been a priority in the past, or it usually comes down to a funding issue and how we can cut the budget, how we can reallocate and dedicate our funds and our resources to our top priority. But I just wanted to say, absolutely sympathize, and that we recognize that it is the most important issue out there. So, thank you.
Any more questions on this agenda item? We'll move on to number 8, project status update reports. Mr. Bond?
Yes, I'd like to give you a status report on where we are at on a number of our projects. The West Worthy Bridge project is well underway. It began earlier this month. It's approximately 23% completed at this time. The contractor is moving right along, so we're hopeful of ultimately having that road back open to traffic shortly. The Roddy Road Bridge replacement projects, right-of-way acquisition is underway on those. We estimate that we'll complete that acquisition around November. There's 11 or 12 tracks that we have to acquire in order to construct the bridges. Mere Road Bridge replacement project, that is the bridge design's being finalized now. It would be constructed in late this fall. We have to coordinate the construction of the Mere Road Bridge with the Roddy Road Bridge. We've got to have the Mere Road Bridge fixed first before we start closing the Roddy Road bridges for their construction. The intersection improvement program by GSA, there's 5 intersections that they're currently working diligently with the state on analyzing the traffic and to determine what improvements that the state will allow, what they warrant. And so we're working with Cedric, is Mr. Grant. I apologize. Mr. Grant is working with us on the state on trying to expedite some of those. So we feel like we're moving pretty good on that. Joe Severio, we're 80% complete on that project. The substantial completion date is going to be in late August. We're pretty optimistic that he's going to make that. The 2007 in-house road project, that's the one that Jackie has designed. We are going to open bids next Tuesday, the 15th, on that project. We're hopeful that we will see good projects. A number of contractors have picked up plans, so we're hoping that we get a good bid there. The 2007 PEC design project is 50% completed. In late August, the balance of that project should be completed. The GSA 2007 road program is 15% completed. Contractors working on that along with the other one, and it'll be in September before it's completed. The other project in 2007 was what we called our intersection projects. This was Volker Engineering. We're getting ready to advertise for the first phase on those. I think we have 3 projects. August the 6th is the scheduled bid opening for that, so we're looking forward to that. And then we're working currently with the state on those intersections. I might point out, when we first entered into these contracts or these with the consultants, we were under the impression that we could work with the state and put in some right turn lanes where we thought was necessary. And since that time, their standards have changed quite a bit. They require a very comprehensive, detailed traffic study that will determine not only whether or not the turn lane that we're asking to build, but we also have to show them the entire intersection. And part of what we're seeing is that they're coming back and saying, well, yes, you can do this right turn lane, but you also need to do this left turn lane over here. So we're in discussions with the state over items like that. Clearly, the parish does not have the ability to make improvements all the way around on state intersections. We can help. We want to help, but we cannot fund that ourselves. So we're currently working with Mr. Grant, with the state, on trying to keep those projects from growing beyond our ability to fund. With that, that's kind of where we're at. Be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Bob, Representative Smiley had talked with me about some state funds, maybe federal funds that we could come up with if we had some matching funds to help on some of these intersections. I guess Mr. Grant's working with Mr. Smiley on that?
Yes, we've recently had a meeting with the state, a number, in fact, not only Representative Smiley, but Representative Lambert
also.
And also Senator Amodei were at that meeting. There are a number of intersections that we're hoping that we can partner with the state to get improved. We do not have any firm commitments at this time, but the state is sounding pretty optimistic on a number of intersections, 3 to be exact, on 44, because they meet their safety criteria. I guess the bottom line is there's safety money available for projects that meet the criteria, and we have 3 intersections based on the accident data that would meet that criteria. So we're working with the state to move those forward as quickly as we can. In addition, there are additional state funds that we're working, we originally started working with Representative Smiley on, and now we're working directly with the state on trying to get some improvements on 431.
Thank you, Mr. Bob. Anyone have any questions? Bob? We'll move on to number 9, speed limit reduction from 25 miles per hour to 15 on Chenier Drive and Ibis Avenue. That's 3 locations. I guess it's all in Willow Lake subdivision.
It's in the reserve. It's called the reserve at Willow Lake.
It's a reserve subdivision. This was a petition submitted to us through Councilman Lower. We're in favor of that reduction. These are basically for the subdivision folks themselves.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Lower, second by Mr. Pat Bell. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Kluwart.
Yeah, on the reductions from 25 to 15, I talked to several people in law enforcement, and that it's certainly warranted, but if it's a request from the people within the subdivision, and I'm all for it. I mean, I've had one in my area. It's just in some areas it's hard on law enforcement to enforce that. Kick up a little bit better than idle, and you might be going more than 15 miles an hour. So.
I think it's very important that we look at the location very hard. On a number of our subdivisions, are dead-end subdivisions. They basically, a straight road comes out onto a straight state road. If the residents in that road want to lower their speed limit. It's themselves that,
Right.
that I think that are affected, and I'm not opposed to that. If it were a through street, I think that's a different matter. We have to have a number of through streets to carry traffic, and it's very difficult to slow traffic down to 15. It just really is. And so I think while it sounds good to lower a speed limit to 15, enforcement becomes a major problem. And just as Mr. Archimont spoke on Swamp Road, you might get the other extreme then, is that aggressive enforcement to enforce a lower speed limit might result in citizens speaking to raise the speed limit instead of lowering it. But again, if it's a single street, the folks on that street want a lower speed limit, I'm certainly not opposed to it.
Yeah, thank you.
More discussion? Have a motion and a second. Any objections? So move. We'll move on to number 10. Speed limit reduction from 25 miles per hour to 15 miles per hour on Old Perkins Place Avenue in Old Perkins Place subdivision. Councilman Pat Bell. Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bob, this, I think, meets your criteria you just talked of. It's
It does. Yes,
it's a
sir.
dead end, ends in a cul-de-sac in the back.
Yes.
All the side streets are 15 miles an hour already, and the homeowner president, I didn't have a petition, so to speak, but it was word of mouth. They had called and wanted the main street coming off of a state road to reduce down to make it like all the side streets. So
Absolutely.
I would like to make this a motion, please.
I'll
Motion by
second.
Mr. Bell, second by Mr. Lohr. Any discussion? Any objection? So move. Got another one on item 11, speed limit reduction from 25 miles per hour to 15 miles per hour on T. Nome Landry Road. Councilman Oliver Joseph. Mr.
Yes,
Bob, I guess
this-
you have that.
Again, it's the same type of criteria, a straight dead-end road that comes out onto a state road. The residents on this particular road has asked Councilman Joseph to support a speed limit reduction, and since they're the ones that are affected, I certainly have no objection to that.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion.
So I got a motion by Mr. Bell, second by Mr.
I'll second.
Benny Johnson. Any discussion?
No.
Any objections? So move. Move on to number 12, speed cushions recommendation from the following by Mr. Bob Turner. We got 3 recommendations, I believe. Mr.
Yes, we
Bob.
do have 3 recommendations, and I also have some additional information that I want to pass along to you. If you will recall, last meeting, we set a deadline at the end of June to send requests for speed humps in to us for evaluation. We ended up with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 14 locations that we were asked to study. Of those, a number of them had problems. 3 of them very specifically met the criteria that we had established, which was a minimum of 500 vehicles per day, a speed of 10 miles an hour, and 85th percentile. 85% of the people are going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, and this be a through street where there's cut-through traffic, potential for cut-through traffic, and such as that. Also, the road should be a straight road, relatively straight, where speeding can become a problem. We've located 3 of those that we're in support of and would like to recommend to you. One of them is Charleston Road, and on Charleston, the average speed is 38 miles an hour, and it has a volume of traffic of 1,917 vehicles a day. Meets the criteria. We would recommend the installation of speed cushions on that road.
I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second it, sir.
Have a motion by Mr. Lohr, second by Mr. Pat Bell. Any discussion? Any objection?
One question.
Mr.
Mr.
Johnson.
Bob, where are you looking at putting those on Charleston?
We've got a map that, if you'll look, there's a attachment with a drawing behind it. It's going to be located approximately 600 feet back of 73. It's kind of a midpoint. You need to have spacing of about 600 to 700 feet between speed cushions, and so we're recommending at that location.
The reason I'm asking is I know District 3 runs a water shuttle from that pond location. I was just curious how that would affect.
Do they go to 73?
Yes, sir. They come up Ronald Road and make that right-hand turn and fill at the pond and then go back to 73 and back to Oak Grove School.
Okay. The speed cushions that we're using, basically they're set so that emergency vehicles do not have to cross over them. An emergency vehicle has a wider tire width, and so it's set specifically to assist them in going over these.
Okay.
These are not like you recall the parking lot speed bumps. On those, long wheelbase vehicles have some real problems crossing them, especially those that are loaded with water have real problems. These are speed cushions that will bring vehicles that are doing 35 miles an hour, bring them down to about 25, but it won't bring them down to 15 or 10 or whatever people might think. It brings them down to a reasonable speed, and we've had them in cobblestone now for about a year. I've not received a complaint. At first, I think the citizens thought they ought to do more than what they're doing, but the studies that we had after showed that they did pull the speeds down to about 25 miles an hour or just slightly below. So we feel they could work very well.
If you would, whenever these are installed, could you make notification to Chief Stewart that they're in there?
Yes, certainly will.
Thank you.
Certainly will.
And Bob, excuse me, how soon, if assuming these pass, can you get them installed?
Well, I've got to get this past council.
Yes.
So we got to go to council.
Okay.
And
I appreciate.
once we do that, then we put these down with our own forces. We currently have them in stock, so within a week after council approval, we can have them in.
Great. I was glad to see Charleston make the criteria. Then.
I do have, Jackie reminded me of something. If you recall, we've had discussions about specifically Charleston Street. We have it on our overlay program. We pulled it off to wait on it because we had some severe drainage problems. We won't put the speed hump on there until such time as we
That's right.
Go with the overlay.
Okay.
So that's one that's a little bit different and may cause a delay.
Okay.
Any more discussion? Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any objection? So moved.
The next one that we have and that we're recommending is Southwood Village. On this particular one, we've got a relatively high 85th percentile speed of 41 miles an hour, and it's 25 mile an hour existing posted speed limit. We've got over 2,260 vehicles on Southwood Village. This one fits our criteria very well. The only thing I want us to be cautious about is that at some point in time you get a high volume of traffic that you've got to be careful about. And let me use a terrible example, but you wouldn't want to put a speed hump out on I-10 for 150,000, 60,000 vehicles a day. There's an upper limit that makes sense to control speeding, and we found that in looking across the country, it's just around that 2,000, 3,000 vehicles per day limit. If you go above that, you're really on a collector route. Even though it may not be classified as a collector, it's going to function as a collector, and so you've really got to be careful of, because you may have a very small percentage of speeders, and so, but you're affecting a large number of people. So between 500 and 2,000 is the range that we ought to work in. We did not previously set a maximum volume of traffic when we came to you. For one thing, we didn't think we would get up into the range of 2,000 vehicles a day, but Southwood Village is one that's approaching that upper limit. but we're supportive of it in this case, but I did want to point that out to you, that there is an upper limit that ought to be considered.
Mr. Bell.
I'd like to make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion by Mr. Pat Bell.
Second.
Second by Mr. Chris Laurel, Southwood Village Road. Any discussion? Any objection? So moved.
The last one that meets the criteria that we have is Tiggy Duplessis. Tiggy Duplessis has the highest 85th percentile speed. We got vehicles, 85% of the people are traveling 56 miles an hour or more on Tiggy Duplessis. It's a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, so it's more than double the speed limit. There's 1,874 vehicles that travel Tiggy Duplessis, and we would recommend that we install these speed cushions on that route.
I'd like to make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion by Mr. Pat Bell. Do I hear a second? Second by Mr. Randy Kluwat. Discussion? Any objections? So moved.
Those are the three that we recommend. However, there are others that are approaching something that we should consider. For example, Villa Galvez is not a through street, but it does meet the criteria in that it has almost 800 vehicles today, and the people are traveling 38 miles an hour. We're not recommending that because it's not a through street. But another one that's similar to that is Bayou Terrace. Bayou Terrace is a relatively long road, goes back quite a ways along the Diversion Canal. The 85 percentile speed on that road is 41 miles an hour, and it has over 680 vehicles a day that travel it. It's one that at some point in time we may want to look at slight modification in some cases. I think the biggest criteria is the volume of traffic and the speed. Length of the road is a factor. The longer the road, generally, sometimes the higher the speeds become. River Highlands is similar to that. The 85th percentile speed is 41 miles an hour in that case, and there's 720. So at some point in time we may come back to you with that, but essentially we've achieved what I consider to be the next phase of speed cushions. We'd like to see these three installed and gauge the reaction from the public, monitor those, and see if they in fact do pull down the speeds like we're hoping it will. Be glad to answer any questions.
Any more questions, Mr. Bob? We'll move on to number 13. Task order contract with Bryant Hammett and Associates for civil engineering and land surveying services. Mr. Bob?
We'd like to add Brian Hamlet and Associates to the task order listing. This again is merely gets on the list, does not assure anybody gets a contract, but at some point in time, as we develop our selection committee, engineering selection committee, we would want to only select those that are on the list that have been looked at by us. And so we're trying to make a reasonable effort to build a nice list. I very clearly tell each of the firms that being on the list doesn't guarantee you anything, but it gets you in the door for consideration. Be glad to answer any questions.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion by Mr. Pat Bell, second by Mr. Chris Laurel. Go ahead with them. Any discussion? Mr. Kluwat.
Yeah, Mr. Bob, what's these folks, their specialty?
They're basically civil engineering development firms. They road design such as that.
Okay.
Any more discussion?
Mr. Bob, do we have a time frame yet on establishing that criteria for the engineering firms and doing the evaluations on them?
We're currently working with Mr. Grant right now on that. In fact, we had a meeting yesterday regarding that. We're assembling the criteria that we want to consider and to recommend, and then make a selection, appoint members that follow that. We're kind of patterned after the Baton Rouge Selection Committee. Theirs is quite a bit larger than what we would anticipate. We think maybe 5 members in the community that have expertise in these fields would be appropriate, but we're still working on that yet, but we're getting closer.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? We got a motion and a second. Any objections? So move on to number 14. Acceptance of a certificate of substantial completion for Boudreaux Road Improvements Project Phase 2. Mr. Bob Turner.
This is a item I'm very pleased to bring to you, is that Boudreaux Road, we put under contract, contractor bid it, went to work, completed it, I guess the best way to say it, he's completed it in less time and on budget, no change orders. We're very pleased with this. We'd recommend acceptance of the substantial completion memo.
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Chris Lord, second by Mr. Benny Johnson. Any discussion? Any objections? So moved. We'll move on to number 15, roads to be accepted into the parish maintenance system. Mr. Bob?
This last item is those subdivision roads that have been constructed and have had a maintenance bond on them for a year. We go back and inspect the condition of those roads and make a recommendation as to whether or not we ought to accept them or whether we ought to reject them or pull the bond or what have you. On these particular roads, there are a number of them, a couple of them that have some problems. If you will look, the evaluation on Old Maplewood Drive, at the very bottom, it has multiple serious pavement failures. The curb and gutter is, it has some issues, and if you don't mind, Alan Ron here has some additional details. He's talked to the contractor, but basically I'd recommend that we not accept this road in this condition, and Alan can probably fill us in on a little of that.
Talked to the contractor today. He said give him 30 days, he'll have it all fixed. We're going to give him 30 days. The bond's not up until 30 days. So we're going to go back and reevaluate it in about 25.
So we're going to bring this back up at the next meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We would be back to you in time to recommend pulling the bond, if you will. In this particular case, the work is significant, and pulling the bond is not going to solve the problem. We need the contractor's cooperation or the developer's cooperation to go in and do that. So on Old Maplewood Drive and also Maple Ridge Avenue, we'd like that condition that we delay any action on acceptance for 30 days. And the others in the subdivision, we have no problems with. There are 4 other roads, Timber Trace, Valley Woods, Misty Grove, and Hidden Ridge. We have no problems with accepting those roads into the parish system. I don't know whether you want to do this as a group all at once or however.
Can do it per subdivision or per road. I think in the past we have done it, through individual roads. So we'll start off with Timber Trace Courts.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we got a motion by Mr. Bell.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lohr. Any discussion? Any objections? So moved. We'll move on to Valley Woods Court. Here a motion.
Motion.
Got a motion by Mr. Kluwart.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bell. Any discussion? Any objection? So moved. We got Misty Grove Court.
Motion.
We got a motion by Mr. Benny Johnson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Chris Lohr. Discussion? Any objection? So moved. Last one on this subdivision is Hidden Ridge Avenue.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion by Mr. Bell, second by Mr. Chris Lohr. Discussion? Any objections? So moved. Okay, Mr. Bob, we'll move on to Creekside subdivision.
Okay. The next subdivision, Creekside subdivision, 3 of those roads have some minor problems. They basically, the developer needs to get in there and clean out some drainage inlets. Not a big deal, but we think that we should not recommend approval for 30 days on those. Again, he could easily do that in the next couple of days, and so we feel like we could come back to you and recommend approval. So on Creekside subdivision, at this point, I would recommend full acceptance of Creekview Drive, and the rest of them that we come back to you in 30 days to see if the developer has made those changes.
Motion on Creek.
Okay, we got a motion on Creekview Drive. by
Second,
Benny
Mr. Chairman.
Johnson, second by Mr. Pat Bell. Any discussion? Any objections? So moved.
The
Move
next-
on to Shadows of Ascension.
The next subdivision, there's only one that we have some minor problems with. Again, it's kind of a clean out of, no, I'm sorry, it's one where we need a sign up and a barricade. Now, if you would like to proceed with the acceptance of that under the condition that he does that, we'll let him know that that's part of the acceptance condition. And if that were the case, we would accept all of those roads.
I'd like to make that motion. Okay.
Second.
All right. Got a motion and a second to accept that one with conditions.
Augustine Avenue.
So we're going to go ahead and start with Windburn Boulevard first. I hear a motion on Windburn.
I make the motion, Mr.
Motion by
Chairman.
Mr. Pat Bell, second by Mr. Benny Johnson. Any discussion? Motion passed. We got Augustine Avenue. I hear a motion on it.
Motion.
A motion by Mr. Bell, second by Mr. Chris Laura. Any discussion? Any objections? So moved.
That's the one with the
That's the one
conditions on it.
pending with the conditions.
Yes.
Right.
Got Mr. Albert Avenue.
Motion.
Got a motion by Mr. Bell. Second by Mr. Chris Laura. Any discussion? Objections? So moved. Pasco Drive will be the last one.
And a motion.
Motion by Mr. Benny Johnson, second by Mr. Bell. Any discussion? Objections? So moved.
That's all the items I have.
Mr. Bob, before we move on, while we're talking about these, I know we're doing inspections on this. On the drainage board, we're hearing some complaints about they are covering up a lot of the back swell ditches in these subdivisions. Are we looking at that when we inspect also? Because that has been a big burden on the drainage department, because after the subdivision is built, we have to try to get back into these backyards.
Sure.
And clean these swells out, and it's kind of difficult with the
Yeah,
structure.
I'm going to have to yield to Alan or Ricky because
Okay.
I don't do backyard swells.
Okay.
We have a 1-year bond. We keep going back, Todd. We look at all the swell ditches, all the boxes in that 1-year bond. We don't have no control over the developer or the contractors building the houses after that 1 year. So it's really a drainage board issue after that,
After that 1 year.
to police it.
As long as in the 1 year you're looking at.
Yes, sir, we sure are, and that's,
Thank you.
Now, I know that Mr. Rue is recommending that we eliminate the rear yard swells by requiring underground drainage systems, and that might be the ultimate solution. I know that that's expensive and would add cost to the homeowner or to the home, but also that would eliminate the concern that you have for people building buildings over the backyard swell and things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Bob. So we move on to number 16.
Motion to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn. by Mr.
Second.
Second by Mr. Pat Bell. Sure, no objections.